Okay, so today's daf is Nun Bet. We actually covered a lot of ground yesterday, so we're going to start at the very top of Nun Bet Amud Aleph, where it's 4 lines from the top. Amar Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Natan says, Amat Raksin lo echriu bo chachamim ikil fanim ikil achutz. So what's talking about here is that in the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim, so you walk into the, so basically if you envision the Beit HaMikdash, you enter again from the east side, you walk straight, and you get to, you're in what's called the Azara, the courtyard. The courtyard doesn't have a roof. And then there's a building that has a roof, and that's called the Hechal, which is comprised of the Kodesh, and then if you go in further, Kodesh HaKodashim. So there is a curtain that separates the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKodashim. According to the Chachamim, there are 2 curtains. There's not just one parochet, there are 2 parochot that divide. And there's an Amma in between them. And the reason for this Amma in between them was, as we learned in yesterday's daf, they were not sure whether that Amma was part of the Kodesh or the Kodesh HaKodashim. Because in the Beit HaMikdash, in Shlomo HaMelech's Beit HaMikdash, there was a wall there. There was a wall of an Amma in between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim, and it had a door. But in the second Beit HaMikdash, there was only curtain, there was no wall. The reason that there was only curtain and a wall is because the walls of the second Beit HaMikdash were much higher, and they couldn't build a sturdy enough wall so thin for the second Beit HaMikdash, so instead they hung curtains. So they weren't sure whether the place that original wall stood was considered part of the Kodesh or the Kodesh HaKodashim because it was in between them, so they put 2 curtains to encompass that area instead. So that was the issue. Was it counted as part of kilifnim? Is it like the inside? Or kilachutz, like the outside? So matkifla Ravina. Ravina raised an objection. My ta'ama. Why would they have such a question about whether it's included in the Kodesh or the Kodesh HaKodashim? Ilema mishum dichtiva bayit asher bana melech Shlomo l'Shem 60 ama orko ve'esrim rochbo u'shloshim ama komato. Is it because it says that the bayit, which is a reference to the enclosed roofed part of the Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo made, was 60 amot long, it was 20 amot wide, and it was 30 amot high. Okay, that it says that there was a that the bayit was 40. That was that the inner part was, in other words, the Kodesh was 40 amot, and the remaining 20 amot was the Kodesh HaKodashim. Right? So it says that the entire thing was 60 amot. The 40 amot was what we call the Kodesh, the Holy, and the Holy of Holies was the remaining 20. Okay, and so therefore, and then it says Uchtiv v'lifnei divir esrim ama orech v'esrim ama rochav. And then it says, in front of the divir is the dividing line between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim. It says it's 20 amot in length, 20 amot in width, 20 amot in height. And that's a reference to the Kodesh HaKodashim, right? That's 20 amot. So it says on one hand that the Hechal is 40, and it says that the Kodesh HaKodashim is, that the Kodesh rather is 40, and that the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, is 20. And it says that the whole thing is 60. So if you have a wall of an Amma in there, it's got to either be part of the first 40 or it's got to be part of the second 20, right? It can't. There's no 61. So if that's the problem, Ravina is saying, is that the problem that you're suggesting here? And you're going to tell me that the issue that the Chachamim had was, we know that there was a wall of an Amma. Was it? And we know that there's only 60 amot in there. So it's got to either be Amma number 60, Amma number 40 of the first 40, or it's got to be Amma number 1 of the last 20. Otherwise it doesn't fit. Is that what you're saying? V'dilma lo mehane esrim v'lo mehane arba'in v'chalala kahashiv kotalim lo kahashiv. But I'll tell you the truth. That's not a good problem. That's not a legitimate question. Why not? Because the pasuk, the Navi, the verses in the Tanakh are only discussing the space inside, not the walls. Okay, I'll tell you that it's talking about the space, not the structure. There were 60 amot of space, not counting that dividing wall. 40 amot of the Kodesh, and then a wall of an Amma that's not counted, and then 20 amot space in the Kodesh HaKodashim. And we don't count that Amma at all. It's neither here nor there.
But then you need 61 to accommodate.
You would need really 61, but when it mentions 60, it means there's 60 amot of space. In which case, that one amah doesn't count. Teda, and I'll tell you a proof that this is the case. Because every time we count the walls, we always count them separately. Ravina says, and that's the proof that the pasuk or the navi is not really talking about the total. In other words, if you were an architect, you're trying to determine the space. The total footprint or whatever of the building is more than just 60 amot. Because you have to count the thickness of the wall on the eastern side and the western side, and the thickness of that one amah in between there. But that's not counted in the 60 amot. The 60 amot is only the space. And how do I know that? It's not because we learned in the Mishnah, Ha'ichal me'ah al me'ah, birum me'ah, because it says that the whole structure in the second Beit HaMikdash, the Heichal, which was a reference to that entire building, okay, was 100 by 100 amot in the second Beit HaMikdash, birum me'ah, and it was a height of 100 amot instead of 30. So you could see why they couldn't make a thin wall. The thin wall wouldn't have been stable. So then it says, Kotel ulam chamesh. The wall of the ulam was 5 amot. That's the wall that separates the antechamber of the Kodesh from the Kodesh itself. That was 5 amot. Va'ulam achat esrei. And the ulam itself was 11 amot. And kotel ha'echal 6. And the wall of the hechal was 6. I made a mistake. The 5 was the outer wall. In other words, when you walk up, the first thing you see is the wall of the ulam. You enter the ulam, which is the antechamber. Then you have the antechamber itself is 11 amot, and then you come up to a 6 amah wall that separates the ulam from the kodesh, and then inside is the parochet that separates the kodesh from the kodesh HaKodeshim. Okay, so it says that was like orko 40 amah. The length was 40 amot, that's now a reference to the length of the kodesh. Okay, v'amat raksin, and then you have that amah in between the kodesh and the kodesh HaKodeshim. V'kaf amah bet kodshei HaKodeshim, and then you have the 20 amot of the kodesh HaKodeshim, and then kotel ha'echal 6, and then you have a 6 amah wall. V'hata 6, and then you have the chamber. They had like a storage chamber behind the kodesh HaKodeshim, which was where they stored things, which was another 6 amot. V'kotel ha'ta 5, and then you have a 5 amah wall on the other side. So in other words, we're only so basically Ravina is proving from the Mishnah that it's very simple that we do not, when we talk about the 100 amot of this building, we are not talking about when we're talking about the 100 amot, we're including the walls, but the walls are always counted separately, because we say, first there's the 5 amah wall when you walk in, then there's the 11 amot of the ulam, then there's the 6 amah wall in between the ulam and the kodesh, then you have in the kodesh 40 amot. Then you have 1 amah in between. And then you have the Kodesh HaKodeshim 20 amot. And then you have the wall behind the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Okay, and then you have the chamber behind the Kodesh HaKodeshim. And then you have another wall, which is the outer wall of the whole structure. Okay, so all of these pieces are not counted as the 60 amot of the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodeshim.
But they're in the 100.
They're in the 100, but they're not in the 60 amot of the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So what do you see from that? That the 40 of the Kodesh and the 20 of the Kodesh HaKodeshim are not including that amah between them, because it counted the amah between them as a separate amah. It's a separate amah, which means that the total there is actually 61, not 60. That's a proof that we don't count it as one or the other. So it is not part of the first 40 and it's not part of the second 20. It's its own calculation. Ele kiddushateh. The question wasn't whether it fits with the first 40 or the second 20. Iki lifnim, iki lachutz. The question is the kiddusha of that amah. Not whether it should be counted in the first 20 or counted in the first 40 or counted in the 20. But whether its kiddusha is the kiddusha of the first 40 or the kiddusha of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. That was the question. V'hainu damar Rabbi Yochanan, and this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. Ba'e Yosef ish Hotzal, that Yosef ish Hotzal asked the following question: Udvir betoch habayit mipenima hechin letiten sham et Aron berit Hashem. It says in the pasuk describing the construction of the first Beit HaMikdash, Udvir betoch habayit mipenima. There was a wall or a separation inside the roofed structure. Okay, which Shlomo set up to place there the Aron Berit Hashem, to place there the Aron, which is the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Okay, and the question that Yosef Ish Hotzal asked was, he asked as follows: Ibaylo hechi ka'amar kera. What does the pasuk mean? Udevir betoch habayit mipenim ma'echin letiten sham. Odil ma'achi kamar udvir betoch habayit mipenim ma. Okay, so the question is, does it mean to say that there was a wall, okay, and Rashi explains, in other words, does it mean that this wall was there and beyond this wall is the Kodesh HaKodeshim? Meaning, not including the wall itself. Beyond the wall is the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Odilma, or maybe Udvir Betoch HaBayit Mipenima, means that the actual wall itself, meaning from the wall and inside, it's like we would have the same ambiguity in English, right? If we said from the wall and inside is the Kodesh HaKodeshim, does that mean that after the wall or including the wall, right? So that's the issue. We can't tell whether it's Udvir Betoch HaBayit Mipenima, whether it means that the wall inside it itself is inside, is part of the inner part, or whether it means within the wall, beyond that wall, is the inner part. Which one is it? Umi misafkale? Is it really a question? V'hatanya, but we learned in a Braita, Isi ben Yehuda Omer, Chamesh Mikrot B'Torah in lahen hechra, that there are 5 pesukim in the Torah that we can't punctuate. We don't know the correct punctuation. In other words, we could read them either way. What are they? Se'et, Mishukadim, Mahar, Arur, V'Kam. These are 5 pesukim where the Torah's punctuation is not clear. In other words, it could be read either way. The first one is se'et. What is se'et? When Hashem speaks to Cain, he says, Im tetiv se'et, ve'im lo tetiv lepetach hatat rovetz. If you improve yourself, God will forgive you. That's how we read it. Im tetiv se'et kama. Ve'im lo tetiv, and if you don't get better, then sin is crouching at the door, right? So, you could read it, Im tetiv se'et, if you get better, you'll be forgiven, se'et. Or you could read it, Im tetiv, if you get better. That's good. But se'et im lo tetiv, you will carry this if you don't get better. In other words, the word se'et, carrying, goes with the next phrase, and it doesn't mean God is going to carry it or forgive you. It means you're going to carry it if you don't get better. The other pasuk is mishukadim. When it describes the menorah, it says mishukadim, arba'a gevi'im mishukadim, that there were 4 cups that were mishukadim. They had almond type designs on them. Okay? And it says kaf toreh ufracheha. It's bulbs and it's flowers. So what was mishukadim? What had the almond type designs? Was it the bulbs that had it, or was it the cups? Because the word mishukadim is separated off. It says arba'a gvi'im mishukadim kaftorah ufracheh. Which one does the word mishukadim go with? The first part of the pasuk or the second part of the pasuk? The next one is machar. What's machar? Moshe Rabbeinu tells Yehoshua to appoint an army and to go fight Amalek. Machar, he says machar, tomorrow. Anochi nitzav, that I'm going to go stand on the mountain with the staff and watch you fight Amalek. Remember the story. So the question is Mahar saying, tomorrow I'm going to go stand, today you don't need me? Or does it mean, go fight Amalek tomorrow? In other words, is he saying, go fight him today, and tomorrow I'm going to help you by going to stand? Because the word Mahar is separated from the two, and we don't know which one it goes with. He says, go fight Amalek. Mahar, I'm going to be on the mountain. So which one does the Mahar, tomorrow, which one does it go with? Does it mean, go fight Amalek tomorrow? Or does it mean, tomorrow I'm going to stand on the mountain because today you're not going to need me yet? That's the question. Next pasuk that's unclear is Arur. It says, Arur, so the question is, when Yaakov is speaking to Shimon and Levi, and he says that they uprooted a shore, over Tzonam Ikiru shore. They uprooted, or they hamstringed, or they uprooted the bull. So arur apam me'az, and then it says their anger should be cursed. So the question is, does it mean a shor arur, that the ox itself was cursed? Meaning that they uprooted the people of Shechem. It's talking about how they killed the people of Shechem. That they were cursed, that they uprooted a cursed ox. Meaning they uprooted the people who were bad, but still they should be criticized for their anger. Or is the arur going on their anger, which is the way that we have it in our Sfarim? We read it as arur apam me'az, that their anger should be cursed. Okay? But in any case, this arur could be read either way, as either referring back to the people that they attacked or referring to their anger. Vekam, it says you're going to die. When Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, it says you're going to die. Vekam ha'am hazeh. So the word vekam is in between the words that say that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to die, and the words that say that the Jews are going to worship idolatry. So is the word Vikam saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going to die, but one day you're going to rise up again? It's Tchiyat HaMetim. Or is it referring to the next half of the pasuk and saying the people are going to get up and worship idolatry? So the word Vikam, it's not clear how to punctuate it. Now, nowadays we have punctuation and ta'amim in all of our books, so we don't have many of these ambiguities as much. Some of them still persist, but most of them we've resolved with the ta'amim. But Isi Ben Yehuda is saying that just reading the words, you wouldn't know how to punctuate it.
The one with Moshe and Amalek, don't we get that from context? I mean, further on it says, and you're standing there and they're fighting, and Moshe's there, and his songs are going up and down, or whatever. Don't we get it from context?
But even the way that we punctuate it, it sounds like tomorrow I'm going to be on the mountain. So the implication, it could be that we're not going to start the war till tomorrow. But the question is whether that machar goes on the previous, where the comma goes in the sentence.
I know that.
Right.
I thought we get it.
Not necessarily. I guess not necessarily. You could interpret it differently. Ve'atanya, didn't we learn in the Braita? So the issue is that this Yosef Ish Hutzal says that I have a problem. I don't know how to read this pasuk about the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Is it saying that the wall is included, or the wall is, or after the wall is the Kodesh HaKodeshim? Which one? And yet we saw that Isi Ben Yehuda says there are only 5 pesukim that we're not sure about, and that was not one of them. And Ve'atanya hu Yosef Ish Hutzal hu Yosef Bavli hu Isi Ben Yehuda hu Isi Ben Gur Aryeh hu Isi Ben Gamliel hu Isi Ben Mahalal El. That all of these names are the same person. Yosef Ish Hutzal, Yosef Abavli, Isi Ben Yehuda, Isi Ben Gur Aryeh, Isi Ben Gamliel, Isi Ben Mahalalel. They're all different names for the same guy. Uma Shemo, Isi Ben Akiva Shemo. And his actual name was Isi Ben Akiva. The point is that he can't, how could he himself, in other words, these are 2 names for the same person. How could he himself say, I have a question about this verse, when he himself said there are only 5 psukim with a question, and this is not one of them? So the answer is, B'deoraita leka b'diviyei ika. What he meant was, in the Torah, there are only 5. In the Tanakh, there are other ones. This one is in the Navi. I didn't count that one. Are there really no other Pesukim in the Torah that are ambiguous? What about the one that Rav Chizda asked about? It says that he sent, this is talking about after the giving of the Torah, he sent the youth of Bnei Israel, and they brought burnt offerings. Okay, Vayalu olot, and the implication of the olot is kivasim, that they would be sheep. Vayizbechu zevachim shelamim parim, and it says that they brought zevachim shelamim. They brought shelamim are peace offerings. They brought parim, bulls. So does it mean? Is that, in other words, the actual pasuk, the actual text of the pasuk is Vayalu olot, that they brought burnt offerings, Vayizbechu zevachim shalemim lashem parim, and they brought peace offerings, bulls. So is that, what does bulls go on? Does that mean that both the burnt offerings and the peace offerings were bulls? Or does it mean that they brought burnt offerings of whatever, and they brought peace offerings, bulls? Because the word bulls comes at the end of the sentence. So which one is it? Is it that they brought sheep for the burnt offerings and bulls for the peace offerings? Because that's what's at the end of the pasuk. Or both of them were bulls? Right, we don't know. So how come Isi Ben Yehuda or Yosef Ben Ish Hutzal, the same person, how come they don't mention this as an ambiguous pasuk? Rav Chizda shows it's an ambiguous pasuk. The answer is that Rav Chizda misapkale, Isi Ben Yehuda pshitale. Rav Chizda thought that was a pasuk that was ambiguous. Obviously, Isi Ben Yehuda didn't think so. He doesn't tell us what he thought it was, but he didn't think it was ambiguous. It wasn't a question for him. We don't know why he thought it wasn't a question, which way he thought was obvious, but obviously he didn't consider it to be a problematic pasuk. The new Mishnah. Hachitzona haita prufa min hadarom. Remember, there are 2 paruchot according to the Chachamim. There's 2 curtains. So when the Kohen Gadol walks up, he has to walk around 2 curtains to get it.
How do we resolve the question of whether it's from the beginning or after?
They didn't resolve it, so that's why they had 2 curtains.
That's true.
In other words, for that very reason, they had 2 curtains. One curtain on one edge of the Aman on the other, because we don't know whether it's Kodesh or Kodesh or Kodeshim. That's exactly why. Yeah. So the Hachitzona haita prufa min hadarom. So the Kohen Gadol, according to the way that the Chachamim have it, not according to Rabbi Yosef, according to the Chachamim, the Kohen Gadol would enter from on the south side of the first curtain. It was pinned back on the south side. He would walk up, upnimit min hatzafon. He would walk up to the north and then go in from the north. Okay? And ma'alech benehem ad shemagel hatzafon. So in other words, he would come to the south. Imagine the first curtain's open on the south side, which is to his left. So he goes in there and he walks along the length of the other curtain, and then he has to turn at the other curtain, which was pinned back on the north side. So in other words, if you looked, you couldn't ever see into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, because if you saw the part that was pinned back that's exposed, you would see the other side of the curtain, second curtain. And when you're inside, it opens in there. So when he would get to the north, in other words, if we get to the entrance, he would face south. And he would walk to his left. In other words, he's walking to the left along the curtain still, right? Until he came to the spot where the aron was. Now, in other words, so he walked this way. He walked what we would say, if we're observing and we have a GPS tracker on him, we would see him going to our right, coming out, and now going back to our left again as he walks along the curtain till the center where he's facing, where the aron would be. Okay? Now, once he gets there, then he places the fire pan between the two staves of the aron. And he would place the ketoret on to the coals. And then the entire Kodesh HaKodeshim would be filled with smoke. He would go back the way he came, right? In other words, he would go out the curtain, down, back out. Okay, and he would say a short tefillah in the outer house. In other words, when he came back to the Kodesh. So he would come out of the Kodesh HaKodeshim as soon as he did his job of filling it with smoke. He would come back to the Kodesh, and there he would say his tefillah k'tara. And he wouldn't be too long with the prayer so that people didn't get scared. Why would they be scared? He might have died in there. Right? So if he doesn't come out for too long, they'll say, oh my gosh, what's the delay? It is not going to make it. So that's why he made it short. And we read what his tefillah was. This was the tefillah of the Kohen Gadol when he came out of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We read it in the Avodah of Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, this Mishnah is a bundle of contradictions. Why? Because if we're talking about the first Beit HaMikdash, mihavu parochet. There was no parochet in the first Beit HaMikdash. It had a wall. There was a wall between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodeshim, not curtains. And this is talking about the Kohen Gadol going in the first curtain and coming out the second curtain. So it can't be talking about the first Beit HaMikdash. Ela b'mikdash sheni. So you're going to tell me we're talking in the second Beit HaMikdash, but mihava aron. The aron wasn't around in the second Beit HaMikdash. So what is he talking about the aron then? Ve'atanya, we learned in a Braita, mishenignas aron nigneza imo tzintenet hamanut lochit shemen hamishcha. That when they hid away the aron, they also hid the flask that had the man. Remember that Moshe Rabbeinu had them keep the man, utzlochit shemen hamishcha, and also the container that had the anointing oil that Moshe Rabbeinu used, umaklo shel aron, ushkedei ufrachea, and the budded staff of Aharon that was also kept next to the Aron. Ve'argaz shagru plishtim doron Elohei Yisrael shene'amar uchlei zahav asher heshivum no asham tasimu ba'argaz mitzido ushlachtem oto ve'alach. So in Sefer Shmuel it talks about how the Plishtim capture the Aron, and when they send back the Aron to the Jews, because every city of Plishtim that they bring the Aron to gets plagued. So eventually they say, we have to send this back. They send it back. It gets found by some farmers in Beit Shemesh. They bring it back. So they put it on a cart that's taken by a calf, and the calf walks it back to the Jews. But they sent with it some golden implements as a tribute, as a I'm sorry for stealing the Aron tribute. And so they kept that also with the Aron Kodesh, because it was a sign. In other words, it ended up being a symbol of the fact that the divine presence guarded over the Aron when it was in captivity. So they kept it together with it. But all of these things were hidden away when the Aron was hidden away.
He went to the place where the Aron was, or did it say he went to the Aron in the Mishnah?
It said he went to the Aron. It says he came up to the Aron and then he put it between the staves.
Okay.
So that's the problem. So Omi Genazo, and who was the one who hid it away? Yoshiyahu Genazo. Yoshiyahu, who lived, very early in history, relatively speaking. Right? That was in the times of, in the times of the first Beit HaMikdash we're talking about. So we're talking about, long before the Beit HaMikdash was actually destroyed. So Yoshiyahu Genazo, Mara Ashi Genazo, what was the reason why he hid it away? Rashi Ketuv, because he saw in the Torah that it says Yolech Hashem Otecha V'et Malkecha Asher Takim Alecha. because he saw that it says that you and your king that you place upon you are going to be taken into exile. And he saw that meant that the Aaron could be threatened. He didn't want that to happen. Amaru gnazo, so therefore he got up and he hid it away. Shedemar, because it says that he told the Levi'im, Vayomer la Levi'im amevinim l'chol Yisrael kedoshim l'Hashem. He said, he spoke to the Levi'im who taught all of the Jews who were holy to Hashem. Tenu et Aaron HaKodesh b'bayit shebana Shlomo ben David melech Yisrael. En lachem masa b'katef. He said, place the Aaron, the holy Aaron, in the house that Shlomo ben David built. You will no longer carry it on your shoulder. Ata ivdu Hashem et Hashem Elohechem v'et amo Yisrael. And now serve Hashem your God and His people Israel. In other words, the rabbis take this as a hint that he told them you're not going to carry it anymore, meaning put it somewhere that it's going to be hidden away. But in any case, the point is that even before the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, the Aron was gone. So how could it be that in the second Beit... So if our Mishnah is talking about the first Beit HaMikdash, there shouldn't be curtains, and if it's talking about the second Beit HaMikdash, there shouldn't be an Aron. So what's going on here? Amar Rabbi Elazar. And Rabbi Elazar said, Atya shama shama v'atya dorot dorot v'atya mishmeret mishmeret. And how do we know that he also hid away the other items? Because there's a gzera shava between each of these items. Shama, it's written about the Aron, the word shama there is used, and it's written about the container of man, shama. It says dorot regarding the man, and it says the word dorot regarding the oil of anointment. It says mishmeret regarding the man also, and it says mishmeret regarding the rod of Aharon. So all of those things were connected one to the other. They all were things that needed to be guarded carefully for all generations as a sign of God's providence and certain miracles that happened that were fundamental to the Beit HaMikdash and to the Jewish people in general. And therefore all of them were kept with the Aron. And they were all hidden away with the Aron because they're all considered like a package deal, basically. They all are symbolic of the covenant between God and the Jewish people, so they were all hidden away. So then, le'olam b'mikdash sheni. Really, we must conclude that it's talking about the second Beit HaMikdash. The Mishnah is discussing the second Beit HaMikdash because it talks about curtains. So if that's the case, ve'umay higia la'aron, what does it mean he got to the Aron then? It means exactly what you said. Mekom Aron. It means the place of the Aron. But wait a second, but then why does it say he placed the fire pan between the staves of the Aron? It's not there. So what is he placing it between? It means as if he were placing it between the two staves. In other words, as he would place it in the spot that it would be were there an Aron present. Okay, so that's the way that it works. It then says he piles the ketoret onto the coals. Okay, so the Mishnah supports the view that Sovra, he piles it, because we learned earlier, a couple of dapim ago, that there's one opinion that says he spreads it out thinly, and there's one that says that he piles it up heavily, and this one is saying he piles it. There are two different braitot. One braita says that he should pile it away from himself. As he spreads it out, he should start away from himself, bringing it closer to himself. As he pours out the ketoret, he should go from further away towards himself. The other one says he should start closer to himself and move further away from himself. Amar Abaye says Tanaihi, it's actually a machloket Tanaim. Which way to do it? Amar Abaye says Mistabra keman damar panim mashichutzalo, and it makes more sense that he would start far away from himself and come closer. Why? Ditznan, because it says Milamedinoto hizaer shelo tathil mipanecha shema tikaveh. Because it says that we tell the regular Kohen who does the regular Ketoret, be careful when you place the Ketoret on the fire to start away from yourself, not towards yourself. Why? Because if you start towards yourself, it's going to start smoking up right onto you as you're going forward, and you're going to get burnt from the smoke that comes up. So therefore you should start away from yourself and come closer, so that as the smoke starts to rise, you're out of the way. And that's exactly what makes sense that the Kohen Gadol would do as well, says Abaye. And therefore, even though there are two braitot, the more reasonable approach would be to start far away and to move closer in.